Hello, this is the last video about reflexive verbs in Spanish. You're welcome. So far we discussed the verbs that belong to a certain kind of group, such as daily routines, motion and movement, and emotions. But the verbs we're going to discuss today do not belong to any certain kind of group, but they are very important to know, especially if you're a beginner. The list is on the screen. Now let's begin. We start with the verbs acordar and acordarse. Acordar means to agree, and acordarse to remember. Does it make sense? No, it does not. Just like in the previous video, you'll have to memorize most of today's verbs, because when it comes to translation, these reflexive verbs are not going to necessarily reflect any action. But the sooner you get familiar with them, the easier your Spanish journey will get. Here are some examples. Next verb is arrepentirse. It means to regret, to be sorry, or to repent. This verb is only used in reflexive form, so you don't have to worry about arrepentir. The examples are: next is asegurar and asegurarse. Asegurar means to assure or to guarantee, and asegurarse is to make sure. Or I guess you could say assure oneself. The examples are down below. Now let's talk about despedir and despedirse. Officially, as far as I know, maybe despedir means to fire someone and despedirse means to say goodbye. But to be honest, I have seen plenty of occasions where both of these verbs were used to say both to fire someone or to see someone off. Remember their default translations on the screen, but just don't get too surprised when both of them are used interchangeably. It's Spanish after all. Enough of small talk. Here are some examples. The next thing is darse cuenta de. I know it looks more like an expression, but it actually means to realize, meaning to become aware of something. If you thought you could use the verb realizar to do that, you're wrong. In English we use the verb realize to say two things: to become aware of something, but also to actually do something, to materialize an idea or to carry out something. In Spanish, realizar covers only the second type of situations, while expression darse cuenta de provides you with the mental understanding of whatever you think you're talking about. Literally, darse cuenta de means to give oneself an account of, but don't worry too much about the literal translation. All you need to know is that in Spanish, in order to say realize, meaning to be aware of, you can't use the verb realizar, and instead you have to use the expression darse cuenta de. Here are the examples. Next pair is desmayar and desmayarse, which mean to become demoralized and to faint. Doesn't make sense, I know. Examples are down below. Next is dirigir and dirigirse. Dirigir means to manage or direct, and dirigirse means to head down or to move in specific direction. Think of it as directing yourself, but when it has to do with going somewhere. Examples are down below. Next pair of verbs is encontrar and encontrarse. First means to find something, and the other one is to find oneself, or to be situated, or to meet. This is a very popular pair of verbs that you'll be seeing a lot. Learn them. I'll wait. Now let's talk about graduar and graduarse. Graduar means to adjust or regulate or measure, while graduarse means, you guessed it, to graduate, like from school or university, for example. It's a very common mistake people make, not using the reflexive version of this verb when you talk about school. Don't be like one of them. Don't be pendejo. Examples are right here. Next pair is hacer and hacerse. Hacer means to do. You knew that already. But what you probably didn't know is what the reflexive version of this verb means, and that would be to become. Don't think, just memorize it. You're gonna see it a lot. Here are some examples. Next pair is llamar and llamarse, to call someone and to call oneself respectively. You were told that me llamo Julio means my name is Julio, which it does, just not literally. Literally it means I call myself Julio, and that implies that my name is Julio. Julio is a piece of shit. Now let's talk about quedar and quedarse. These ones are insanely popular and deserve a separate video because they have a lot of translations. But the most popular ones are to be left and to stay. Here are a couple of examples. Next verb is quejarse. It means to complain. That's it, just one verb. Isn't it beautiful? Next pair of verbs is quitar and quitarse. Quitar means to remove or to take away, and quitarse means to take off. It's often used with taking off clothes. Some examples are down below. Now let's talk about sentar and sentarse. First one means to sit someone down, and the second one means to sit oneself down. Seems simple, right? And well, it is. Just be careful with the conjugation in present tense when we talk about yo form, because both verbs sentarse, to sit down, and another verb sentirse, to feel, have the same exact conjugation in the present tense when we talk about me or yo. For example, me siento bien means I feel good, but me siento aquí means I sit here. Based on the context, you can figure out which one is a conjugated form of sentarse and which one is sentirse. Just don't freak out when you see the same conjugation for two different verbs. It's just the way it is, and luckily it's only like that for the first person. The last pair of verbs for today is volver and volverse. Volver, just like regresar, means to come back or return, but Volverse means to become. Super weird, but very popular. That's already two ways for you to how to say to become in Spanish. You can use Volverse or you can use Hacerse. Same thing, but to be honest, I personally have seen Volverse much more often than Hacerse when it comes to say to become. The last set of examples is on the screen. Alright. It's time for us to end this series of videos called Reflexive Verbs, Pain and Gain. So what have we learned? In the first video we discussed what reflexive verbs are and how they work in general, and also within a specific group called daily routines. In the second video we talked about another popular group of reflexive verbs, that is emotion and movement. The third video showed us how to be a dick on Twitter and in real life. And today we discussed a bunch of verbs that don't really belong to any specific type of group, but they, just like the verbs from previous videos, are so popular that you won't be able to step out of your house if you don't know how to use them. Now, I know it's not easy and it's a lot of information. I also know that these types of videos can be extremely boring, especially without an occasional dick joke in the middle. There are many reflexive verbs in Spanish, so it will be impossible for us to go through all of them, but there's no need. What we do need is to learn a bunch of very popular reflexive verbs with some exceptions and just hope for the best. What you have now, hopefully, an idea of how reflexive verbs work and an arsenal of the most popular verbs up your sleeve. If you can use and recognize the verbs we discussed in these 4 videos, nothing will stop you. All the links are in the description. See you soon.